FD Signifier posted a really bad video about Mamdani. Oh, not trying to drama farm, but he had a lot of really divisive and anti-electoral takes. Isn't he like generally anti-electoral? That's not really new, right? Someone, trigger warning, someone give me the timestamp ahead of time where he mentions me. It's not drama, we're just taking a look. Did anyone see in the recent Mamdani video that he shaved and he just has a mustache? That's crazy. That's crazy. I support that because as a guy who's had a beard for like 50, 60 years, I sympathize with the desire to test people to see if they still love you when you shave. And based on what people were saying, I mean, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if they do.
I got my cloth, y'all, but I can't find my glasses. I think they're in the car.
We're not going to watch the whole thing, of course. You know, we don't need to like, we're not here to beget or stir shit or whatever the fuck. I just want to see the bit.
And the car's in the shop, so we're just gonna feel a little different this time. I still see fine. I might have a headache when this is all done.
That's unfortunate. Okay.
From our government and our economy and how all these things should be organized.
You guys see Kat Abigazela said that she's leaving Twitter. I think that's kind of unfortunate. I know that every time she goes on Twitter, she gets absolutely dogpiled, but I feel like you have to be able to be the lightning rod. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of hard to communicate outside of that. I guess there's Instagram or whatever, or TikTok. I just don't really use those apps, so it feels more of a deal to me, you know?
All of that is shifting. It's not a fever pitch. It's not fully saturated. And it's definitely not perfect, but it is happening. One example of this comes from the story of a legitimate socialist running for mayor in New York. Buffalo, New York, back in 2021. You may have missed this because it was relatively niche at the time and it was at the height of the pandemic, but in Buffalo, New York, a black woman named India Walton ran as a Democratic socialist and won her primary race against a long-standing establishment candidate named Byron Brown, who had been entrenched in the role of mayor of that city for almost 20 years at that point. Like most major cities, the Democratic nominee race was the only real election that mattered, and by winning the nominee, India Walton was all but guaranteed to become the city's next mayor, or so it was thought. See, the Democratic Party, surprise, surprise, showed its true colors and its allegiance to power and the status quo by helping Byron Brown mount a massive independent campaign in Buffalo as a write-in candidate, even helping him mass-produce stamps to give out to voters that they could use to write his name in for mayor by just stamping the name on the page, which sounds illegal, but you know, I don't know. Despite the fact that Brown had been mayor for going on 20 years and had seen the city decline in numerous ways that entire time, this was presented as a win for the people.
That's weird. I mean, they did that shit with Cuomo, right?
But in reality, the Democratic establishment in New York just refused the people's will and did not get behind the candidate chosen for their party. Furthermore, Brown received significant support and donations from New York City Republicans that fueled him to victory. Hilariously, Brown would then abandon his role as mayor 2 years later after he accepted a role as a CEO of a horse betting organization or something in New York.
Okay, wait. So when are we getting to the Mamdani stuff? So far, I love the info. I just want to know where we're, you know.
Things, the mayor-elect of New York City. Recently, Mamdani made history by becoming one of the youngest and maybe I think the first ever Muslim mayor of the country's richest, most populous, and most important city. He has immediately thrust himself onto the big stage of politics, becoming a powerful figure in the Democratic Party, and he comes into that position with a ton of fanfare, goodwill, and hope.
Neil Gaiman? What are you doing in my falafel?
And the last time I've seen something like this was in 2008 with Barack Obama. That he is first and foremost a politician, my goal still is not to just simply point and say Mamdani is bad actually, but to remind people that regardless of how good or bad Mamdani's politics are, it's our work and our energy that we put into him that is the actual real value and real lesson that we need to be paying attention to. But now that
that's true. That's true. They never shut up about Obama. Well, but that's true though. Like Obama had a similar energy and fanfare. If you're just talking about like energizing people, yeah. Obama back in 2008, that was like a that felt insane back then. Yeah. I wasn't like a crazy leftist. I was like 14 years old or whatever back in 2008, but no, he really energized people. Obviously it turned out to be a smokescreen, you know. Disillusioned many people.
Mamdani's actually won, and I got that bit of shade out the way. We can stop crafting a narrative around Mamdani that he is our Marxist-Leninist brown king by way of Africa, and say that regardless of his many flaws that we'll get to, Mamdani good actually. There's some serious criticism to engage with around Mamdani that I will get to in a moment. But what I really want to do here is try to model a type of pluralism. Try to show that you can embody two truths at once, something that so many of us
have been speaking about Mamdani, and they're like, he's a unique talent like Obama, and they view him like his energy.
You know, Obama made that call. Like, I'm so curious. I wish I was a fly in the wall.
Yeah, that call must have been, I think, because he didn't endorse him, but he was like, if you need some advice.
Indication of how things would go. The main thing to consider about Obama as it pertains to Mamdani is that regardless of how he might have been perceived going into his presidency, Obama very quickly showed his cards once he was in. He very publicly filled his entire cabinet with establishment figures, people with significant ties to the financial industry, and lobbyists, along with any other type of narrative you can think of. More significantly is that he also very quietly—
The whole video is focused on grassroots work because politicians may and often will disappoint you. But that's true, though. Okay, that's true, but it's conditionally true. Because there is a difference between a politician disappointing you because they are lying to you or because they did lie to you, and a politician disappointing you because it turns out the levers and mechanisms of power are super complicated, and behind the scenes there's a whole war for control happening that you're not really privy to. So inevitably, there will be compromises, there will be difficulties that you can't understand the full range of. There will be things that Mamdani wants to do and is trying to do, but attempting to publicly advocate for it would cost political capital or violate some promise or expectation behind the scenes, and in so doing compromise his ability to do other good things, you know? So the conditional statement, I guess, is even when politicians disappoint you, that doesn't mean necessarily that you shouldn't support them. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, even if you're disappointed, they're still like really pushing the envelope forward. If every single time a lefty politician gets, they get elected and everyone's like, well, we're not going to invest our faith in the system. Let's focus on grassroots work. We guarantee they no longer have the public mandate to get anything done, which means they can't get anything done, which means we kind of guarantee that they will disappoint us, We gotta hold them up. I guess it's like, if he pushes as hard as he can for free childcare, which so far he has, right? He pushes and he pushes and he pushes and he pushes, as hard as he can. And because of, other factors, in spite of his best efforts, he can't get it done. We should direct our anger towards the people blocking him, not towards him. Because he's doing his job there, right? I mean, he's fighting as hard as he can. We have to assist, because there's nothing the liberal deep state wants more than for us to get disappointed and turn on him. They would love that. All the people preventing him from getting it done would be like, oh my God, that's fantastic. They eat their own so fucking easily. He's not even the problem, and they're going after him. At 23:30, he criticized Mamdani for not winning black people in the primary. Man, you've really scoped out the disagreeable parts, haven't you? You know what? Sure. Fine. If you really want me to, okay. He's not black enough or something. Let's go.
Bit of skepticism because Mamdani had a lot of young progressives in New York very excited about him and hopeful for his chances. This culminated in a dominant win with the Democratic primary in New York. However, when the results of that win were analyzed, Mamdani was shown to have actually significantly lost the black vote in New York. Something that, if it happened again, might lead to him losing the general. However, this proved to just be another opportunity for Mamdani and his campaigners to show how talented they were, because by the time the final election results came in, Mamdani had considerably changed his outcome, and the black vote ended up being his most supportive base. Specifically, I want to point out black men, because people—
Gulan 24. The way you framed this section was a little bit disingenuous, don't you think? You said at 23:30 he criticizes Mamdani for not winning black people in the primary. Is that like the vibe you get from this? Come on. Now you are drama farm. That's drama farming. It's not just getting good content. You're actually drama farming at the cost of good content. Because I come in, I'm looking, I've got my race jokes prepped. I'm ready to make self-debasing comments as a white boy. Gonna pull out the top tier comedy on this one. It turns out there's nothing wrong with what was said, I love you, but you should really just shut up and learn from FD. Okay, Rubles, now you've activated me again. What exactly? All right, this white boy's ass is seated. What exactly should I learn from FD? Out of curiosity. I'm not saying he doesn't know anything I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a specific point that you wanted me to familiarize myself with, right? My white ass is seated. What should I learn? I'm just watching the video, you know? Everyone's so damn antagonistic. Antagonistic in this direction, antagonistic in that direction. Be more black. I'm trying. I say unk.
Will swear to God that we are secret Trump voters and Republicans, and this has never been true. It is so untrue. I'm going to leave that alone for now. We'll touch on it some other time. I got several other videos talking about it. This switch up
Well, it's not that black Democrats are secretly Republicans. That's idiotic. It's that many black Democrats are reactionary, at least relative to the Democrats. Because again, if you're right-wing and white, you vote Republican. If you're right-wing and black, you probably still vote Democrat. So there's not as much filtering there, you know, like outside the Democratic Party.
For a few reasons. First, it's because of how Mamdani campaigned. And as I said in a B-Sides video a month ago, it was clear that Mamdani had seen the mistakes of similar campaigns such as Bernie Sanders's in 2016 and 2020 and made very explicit inroads with connecting with black voters.
Tonight I have an extra ticket to the Wu-Tang Clan concert at Madison Square Garden.
And likely because of his area of studies, his love for hip hop, and the fact that he's been living in New York, he did not come off nearly as cringe or posery as another figure might have under the circumstances.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming.
It's a real pleasure.
Wow.
It's a real pleasure.
At a Wu-Tang show.
But I think what it really comes down to is the fact that he ran on a platform of affordability and being focused on providing actual solutions.
We erasing that Bernie got rat fucked. It is definitely true that Bernie Sanders had a rough time convincing black voters. I think a big part of that is that a lot of those black voters just aren't that progressive. But a big part of it is also that Bernie doesn't exactly have the broadest appeal. Like Bernie Sanders' old coastal Jewish grandpa vibe is obviously super charming and a lot of people like it. But I can understand that not having the same reach as somebody like Mamdani, because Mamdani really is like the median New Yorker, isn't he? He's like the perfect New Yorker. He's mixed race and ethnicity, basically, an immigrant. He's like flawlessly culturally conscious, right? Like he's very culturally literate. He knows about, he's with the sports and the music and the, like he's you know, all over the place. So it works very well. It's tougher to do that for all Americans, you know, because I mean, obviously you can't really represent all Americans as in the same way that you can represent all New Yorkers, because the broader the group, the harder it is to reach out to everyone. It is very difficult to compare mayoral campaigns to presidential campaigns, for sure.
Solutions to normal Americans, which is something that neither of the major parties seem to want to do these days. And lastly, it didn't help that
Wait, didn't want to do what?
And being focused on providing actual solutions to normal Americans, which is something that neither of the major parties seem to want to do these days. And lastly, it didn't help that Cuomo and to a lesser extent, Eric Adams both ran what amounts to racist fear-mongering campaigns, where they spent more time calling Mamdani an anti-Semitic evil communist than presenting any type of...
I still can't believe they did this, man. This was crazy. I can't believe they thought they could get away with this. That's so funny.
Attractive plan for what they were going to do for the city. The only thing they were banking on, much like Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, was maintenance of the status quo, which most people understood was awful. But this brings us to the more concerning areas that we need to talk about with Mamdani.
Let's go.
How him being labeled and seen as this progressive figure is ultimately dangerous for real leftists and progressive movements, but at the same time is an opportunity we really can't pass up. Part 2, what should we expect from Mamdani? While Mamdani is a democratic socialist and has been smeared by mainstream media as a communist and some type of scary radical, and at the same time, a lot of leftists, especially more moderate leftists, have adopted Mamdani as a symbol of progress and a legitimate win for the actual left in this country and not the Democrat or liberal left. So oddly, what we have is two very different political factions saying almost the same thing about a politician, which is rare. Obama, Biden, and Kamala Harris were also smeared as too far left and communists, etc. Minnesota! But no halfway knowledgeable leftists looked at Biden, Obama, or Kamala as one of their own, which makes sense. But how sensible is it to claim Mamdani as a real leftist in the same circumstance? The fact is,
well, he's obviously not like them for a variety of reasons. You can get that kind of broad tent, right? Like FDR was a real social democrat, like a proper SD social democrat, but he did maintain a lot of support, not only from the more like left-leaning, labor rights activists, union organizers, and so on, but also from like a broader plurality of or majority of liberals. So you can build out that broader tent. I've always thought like the perfect socialist candidate would be beloved by liberals, because a socialist, in essence, promises to deliver on everything that a liberal politician can only gesture at. A liberal, ostensibly, ideologically, nominally, should be in favor of a bunch of the things that the social, like Bernie Sanders or whatever, advocate for. It's really just a matter of selling it to people. And of course, the avalanche of bourgeois propaganda bullshit you have to deal with, right? Like the mainstream media is going to say you want to ruin everything and you have to deal with that. But I think like in a vacuum, I think that socialists can make reasonably good cases to liberals. Also, most liberals are not like that ideologically wooed by capitalism. Because I've met a lot of liberals in my life. Some of them are like, yes, the principles of the free market are what beget the greatest advances in society. But that's like a small minority. That's like a neo-lib globehead thing. The majority of liberals, I think, are, on capital. They're like, yeah, I guess it works or whatever. But for the most part, the shit they focus on is the broader progressive ideals. I think that you could get them to ditch the capitalism bit pretty easily in the absence of counter propaganda, which is of course never going to happen. But you know what I mean. I think the fact that Mamdani has been able to so effectively endear himself to those people is a very good sign.
Mamdani has done about as much as he can to distance himself from that label, and his policies, while progressive, aren't necessarily socialist policies. The sad reality is that Mamdani's platform and political goals seem radical and extreme in a country that's been ruled by neoliberal fascists for around 50 years. I love the memes where socialism wins.
Well, I mean, you can't actually invoke socialism as a mayor, right? You can take steps. You can empower unions. You can work with them. You can culturally bolster the cause, but there's not really any way to do socialism as a. You can push. You can push the envelope. Yeah, something Overton window.
Memes.
Yeah.
I love the memes, but I also have come to understand that memes are just, some people don't get the joke.
Yeah, part of the reason that I was writing so hard for was because I like New York City is one of the cities where like it's like, okay, like directly depending on who you put in as mayor, they have so much real power, and it's like there's a very real impact to who gets in there. So it's like I can't even pretend to be anti-electoral in this sense, because it's going to be so direct and so many like
the goal is you're trying to prove that these ideas work on a small scale. Right? When you freeze the rent, when you push for the construction of new affordable housing, when you build like government-run grocery stores, or you make the daycare free, what you are essentially showing is, yes, these things can work. You can decommodify elements of the economy and let them just be paid with taxes contributed by the wealthy, and it can work. These processes can work, and you're basically selling people on the soft case there. You know what I mean? It's very important, because nobody, and I mean not even like sensible socialists, are going to press the big red button on national policy unless they can point to effective implementations of those policies on a local level, right? Like we don't want to do housing Lysenkoism here, where you have like an ideologue at the top level being like, yeah, this should work. This feels woke to me. This feels based. Meh. And then it turns out there's some fiddly nuance to the details of implementation that makes it like, then it doesn't work in the long run, It's not what you want. You want to make sure these things work on a small use case.
Little ways. I kept reiterating, and people would get mad at me where they're like, oh, well, isn't it great that like he's like at least putting the name of socialism out there? I'm like, well, this isn't socialist. Like none of this is socialism. And it's like I have to like clarify, it's like this is like at best like a social he's just running some like, I kept saying like good municipal policies. Like
it's all rebranding.
It's not socialist in the sense that you're seizing the means of production and decommodifying all industry or whatever, but given like what a mayor can actually do, I feel like he's pushing about as hard as you really can, reasonably. You know what I mean? Like, what more could you do on a municipal level? You can't like nationalize everything. You can't decommodify all housing or seize industry or anything. You don't have a standing army to defend like your new social experiment against the Pentagon or whatever. I don't really know. You have to prove these things can work.
That's all it is. It's just a branding exercise. I mean, the joke of having all these options, right? The luxury of the United States, they have two capitalist parties, right? All that stuff is very true. It's all about branding. I mean, Glenn Ford talked about this, the great late Glenn Ford, Black Agenda Report, where they're able to be the more efficient evil because we do give them grace, right? Because they're not abhorrent monsters that we have to turn away from or immediately recognize as white supremacists, but they uphold white supremacy. They uphold the status.
I don't know what we're on.
Kwame Ture told us about, the pitfalls of liberalism, and these are the people that we have to recognize are our enemies, and they already chose a side. Why are we pretending otherwise, right? But again, it's all marketing. It's all to make us more comfortable and think that we're progressing somewhere, that we're moving forward, right? That we're somehow, we haven't claimed victory, but we're winning breadcrumbs. But where are those breadcrumbs leading us to?
Americans have gotten so used to the government being subservient
I don't really know what that has to do with Mamdani.
to oligarchs and the rich that we've somehow been convinced that the government serving regular people directly is socialism. Rent freezes and affordability isn't socialism, it's regulation of what is still very much a free market. The only seemingly socialist plan.
Well, it's definitionally not a free market if you're doing stuff like rent freezes, though. Not even close. Like, that's a pretty heavy-handed intervention by the state. I mean, yeah, again, he literally can't invoke socialism. So I guess the question is, would you prefer it if Mamdani said, I'm a social democrat and I'm here to do social democracy? Even if in his heart he is a socialist, but he's doing the most that he can? Or would you prefer him to say, look at what I as a socialist have to offer you. Through policies that I advocate for, I can reduce your cost of living. I can make this city better. Now imagine what I could do. Imagine what we could do with more power. Like, I'm the mayor now. Imagine if somebody calling themselves a socialist was president. Imagine if we were capable of making decisions beyond the municipal. That to me is, I think, the point, right? Like, most every politician that gets elected here in the United States is a capitalist. Usually they're not really making an affirmative case for capitalism. They just kind of accept the status quo, and people accept what they consider as normal. But for socialism, I think you have to make a positive case because it's not the status quo. You have to argue, like, look, this is but a small taste of what we can offer you. This is what our ideology can do,
Plans Mamdani has are the city.
I think the argument's more about the dangers of shifting the public's understanding of what socialism is. I have bad news for you. Already, literally nobody knows what socialism is or what capitalism is. Nobody knows anything. I'm sorry, like, if we're worried about, like, tainting the purity of the definition, then that ship sailed. I don't think it ever didn't sail. I think that ship was built out at sea. People call the Soviet Union socialist. No, the f*** it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, that's so lost. So I don't know about the value of that. That seems like a hopeless battle, to be honest with you. I think you should just do good things and call it socialism. If people associate good things with socialism, then we can do more good things and more socialism.
Bus and grocery programs that he's hoping to have.
To that end, you've proposed city-run grocery stores, fare-free public transit.
A network of municipal-run grocery stores, one in each borough, so 5 in total, would cost the city $60 million. The city is already set to spend more than $140 million subsidizing corporate supermarket chains without any guarantee of affordability from that subsidy.
And if we're realistic, those are probably two plans that are more likely to fail than his others. This is a really important thing for
possibly. Those are socialists, though, right? I mean, those both essentially entail the decommodification of those industries, right? At point of contact with the consumer. That's definitely like a socialist direction.
Leftists of any ilk to keep in mind, as it represents an attack on the left from both sides. On the more obvious end, if Mamdani fails, or to be realistic, whenever he does inevitably fail at something, it will be presented in the cultural zeitgeist as a failure of leftist ideology as a whole, regardless of what favor of left you abide by. We're all just being represented by Mamdani on the main stage right now. Whatever he does is a reflection on us. It's hard enough to have folks differentiate the left from liberals. Now that someone is ostensibly a leftist is in office, that differentiation is going to be even harder for people. However,
I just don't think this is true. I don't think this is a real problem. I think this is only a problem if your sense of identity and self-worth is derived from disagreeing with liberals, you know? It just you know this is a bad idea because on the far right they're the exact opposite. The far right, notably much more successful at infiltrating their party, by the way. The far right loves it when there's just a general blur of ideas that pull the general electorate towards them. You know what I mean? They don't want to be thought of as Nazis, even though a bunch of them are. They're like, nah, actually, it's just based in conservative. Real conservatism is when you don't let any immigrants in. And because they don't purity test the out of their own group, they've been much more successful in taking over the White House. Yeah, I just don't really see the issue with this, to be honest. Like, already nobody knows what socialism is. Basically, no socialists know what socialism is. I don't think there's really a problem with us doing something that appeals to liberals, because there are 150 million of them in this country, at least. Kind of need their support. It'd be a good idea for them to agree with the direction things are heading.
More insidiously is the fact that Mamdani represents the left while not actually needing to govern as a socialist or Marxist, etc. This gives Mamdani a lot of power that can be used to ultimately further marginalize actual leftist ideology in this country, whether
no. Again, this to me seems like it's only a concern if you're really invested in purity testing for the sake of your identity as an internet communist. I just don't. Yeah, this actual leftist thing, I don't understand. Advocate for the policies that you care about and make a positive case that the things that you believe in, the ways that you want to govern, improve people's lives. You know, I don't really care about this, to be honest. Do you see this on the other side? Do you see the neo-Nazis being like, no, by calling neo-Nazism conservatism and blending the two, you're distorting the real definition of Nazism? Actually, you do see it sometimes, but those are like the most ineffective loser far-right people on Twitter, you know? Like, they're not in the White House. Yeah, they're mocked for it.
accidentally or purposely. For example, among many red flags that have popped up around him thus far, the biggest has been his capitulation to the NYPD.
Police have a critical role to play in creating public safety.
And the maintenance of Jessica Tisch, who was an open Zionist and has Zionist ties as a chief of police. Now, I don't personally reasonably expect, based on the reality of the situation, that Mamdani is going to purge the entire New York government of Zionist elements in a city like New York. That's just not a realistic outcome. But this particular role is something he could have had more control over, and his decision not to remove her is concerning. Also, while the NYPD...
Well, yeah, he could have chosen to not keep her, of course. He had, like, power, he had authority in this role. So you have to wonder, why wouldn't he do it? And this is one of those, you know, what's going on behind the scenes things. It seems to me the most likely case for him keeping Commissioner Tisch, even though she sucks, is that he thought that the NYPD would be unruly and belligerent if he replaced her with somebody that they didn't respect. Now, obviously, he has to frame that as him liking her, you know? He can't say, oh, I don't like her, but I'm keeping her on board so the NYPD doesn't revolt under my leadership. For obvious reasons, that wouldn't really fly. It's only you can really do, you know?
Is incredibly powerful. I don't think he had to apologize to him on the way to winning the election. I don't think it was necessary.
My statements in 2020 were ones made amidst a frustration that many New Yorkers held at the murder of George Floyd. The campaign that I am asking New Yorkers to consider is one that has been clear on its public safety approach. It's one that speaks about a desire to work with police officers.
And then on top of this, there's rumors about him and AOC.
As a general rule, I don't really think you should ever apologize. That was a pretty, that apology was fine, though. I have heard far worse apologies, you know, more unnecessary ones. Like, I think he should not have apologized for the globalize the Intifada thing, because they did not let up on that at all afterwards. It was just a waste of time, you know?
Holding back other progressive candidates, among other things. Coming back after the fact here to say that this was not a rumor, this ended up being actual fact. While it was unlikely that Osei would have ever beat Jeffries, it still kind of shows Mamdani to be more of a politician than any type of revolutionary. I didn't look into all the details, and he has...
You should, because the details are pretty important on this one.
since tried to plead his case as to why he thinks that was a good idea. I don't really feel him on this explanation, but at the end of the day, it's him being a politician, and that's kind of the whole point I'm trying.
Yes, he is a politician. He is yes, that is the job that he was running for specifically. He wasn't running for the job of revolutionary. He was running to be the mayor of New York City.
To make here. This is important to keep in mind because Mamdani is legitimately a paradox. He represents both a huge win for the left and in the world of electoralism, but that fundamentally is not necessarily a win. He also presents a proof of concept on electoral.
I don't think that's a paradox at all. I don't think it's a paradox for a leftist to win an election. I think it's possible for us to do that. We should raise our standards.
Politics having the capacity to shift toward populist, anti-capitalist, and pro-working class centered appeals, and as flawed as it may be, reintroducing the concept of socialism to public discourse at a large scale is a huge deal and would be a big benefit to the actual people of New York that would benefit from his policies. As I've spoken to in a few other election-centered videos this year, the left is simultaneously way far behind in our power in this country while also being more visible, more organized, and more powerful than we've ever been since probably the 70s. Nixon, COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, and the Cold War put the American left on life support by the mid-70s, and Reagan finished the job by the early 80s and put into motion a generation of misinformation, counterinsurgency, and a distorted history to ensure that many Americans would always perceive anything left of liberalism as evil or foolish, to the point where I assure you there will be people in the comments saying stuff like, how are you a socialist yet you make money on YouTube? Please, they're coming.
Stay with me now.
They probably didn't even get to this point. They're going to be there. Ironically, I think the wave of Obama and his subsequent failures sparked a few embers for those like myself who were left inclined but didn't really have the baseline knowledge to understand the philosophies behind the left to pursue that and
go deeper.
And that wave that's been going on for a good decade plus now has resulted in 2 socialist mayors in America. Take that for what you will, but the fact that I can joke about this, about the predictable, uneducated responses from people about socialism, is indicative of a broader culture of movement than it was just a few years ago. A lot of that comes from social media, but it's bleeding into normie media and now legitimately into governance. But it is moving and not just online in real life. But understand, Mamdani doesn't get credit for that. You do. But that's also the thing we have to guard from. We have to resist the stand moment that is developing behind him. We have to resist stand culture in general, but that's another video. And the thing that makes me realize—
I disagree with that completely. Our only shot at winning power is through cults of personality. It's always been like that for every side. Like for every that's just modern politics, especially in a post-social media world, you know? I don't think there's any giving up on that at all. You kind of have to. It's unfortunate, but it's the only thing that you can really do.
That this is very much possible is that I chose my guests for this video representing what I thought were different views of Mamdani because I thought they would be more different.
Being like a hardcore supporter for a candidate does not come at the expense of representing your own power. You're not ceding power to that person. It's a reflection of the fact that the base of support is the power. You know, Mamdani wouldn't be able to get anything done and won't be able to get anything done if he doesn't have extremely ardent supporters. You need to stand by them, you know? God, look at how much Trump has been able to do just in large part because everyone has, like his crew is ride or die. He's gotten away with so much.
I was very pleasantly surprised to see that they weren't as different as I had initially thought.
The standing / a cult of personality not come with the dangers of overlooking mistakes by the person? Yeah, sure. But that's just, you just have to take that with the, you just have to try to do well by that. You have to take that with the system, right? You throw your support behind people. You can't give up on supporting them the moment they make a mistake, because if you did that, we will never ever get anything. You just have to be able to critically evaluate if a person's still worth your time and interest. There's no like easy shortcut or anything. I'm just saying you can't performatively distance yourself from people who actually get elected because you're afraid of accepting culpability for any mistakes they make, right? Because that's what everyone on the left wants to do. Everyone wants like a perfect center of power. Nobody ever wants to support the person who's actually in office, because a person in office will inevitably make mistakes or compromises, and then you have to defend that. How do you defend that while remaining morally pure? You know, how do you virtue signal if you're defending pragmatic compromise?
not nearly as polarized.
Capitulated to Donald Trump and his shutdown. And I grew up on welfare. I grew up on WIC.
Also root for the results he's seeking that benefit the people. We have to both use his branding as
Now we have to hold our leaders to some kind of standard, otherwise we're just mega. I didn't say we don't hold our leaders to some kind of standard. I'm just saying, like, you have to support them. You have to maintain a base of support, otherwise they can't do anything.
an opportunity to introduce leftist politics to more people as we chip away at 50 years of misinformation, but also guard against him and or the Democratic Party co-opting leftist ideology to recuperate it into the status quo. Again, never forget that after the grand uprisings of 2020, after people marched and burned down stores and we shouted, defund the police, they actually increased police funding in cities across the country, mostly Democratic cities, including the former Democratic president. So yes, once again, what I'm getting at is that we have to learn from the mistakes people my age and older made with Barack Obama. And with that, I have just 3 more major keys that I want to present to you all. Number 1, do not give Mamdani a pass because he's dealing with overt racism from Democrats and Republicans. Everybody's being really racist to Mamdani right now, including black people. Acknowledging that this will happen and that it will be blatant and ridiculous along with covert and dog whistling, that is something we should do. We must and should contend with this when it's encountered. Still, it's important not to allow the fact that Mamdani is going to face racism to lower your standards on what should be expected of his position. This was a grievous mistake made with Obama. When Barack Obama became president and really triggered the beginnings of what would eventually become Trumpism, I think a lot of black folks who should have known better turned off their critical faculties to the point that we gave him way too much grace.
I can understand this if his point is just to be cautious. Yeah, I agree with caution. I just think that at least within some sections of the left, that seems to be the only advice ever offered, I guess. Because I remember this with AOC. Look, I've not really expressed much enthusiasm about AOC now, but I do remember like years and years of AOC getting lots of flack for stupid bullshit that wasn't actually worth criticizing her for. You know what I mean? And I just think a lot of that is because you will always maintain a greater degree of moral purity by distancing yourself from any actual consequences of an election than you will by owning it with continued support, which guarantees nothing ever happens, basically. But yeah, caution's needed. But what about joy, man? What about whimsy? I'm serious. Like, it's a huge deal. Mamdani beat Cuomo. He beat the Uniparty. It was a massive wave. It's not enough to just remember, okay, politicians aren't perfect. No. We know. But you also have to plant your feet in the ground and take ownership over your victories. Gotta have some faith. Gotta clasp your hands together a little bit. Otherwise, if you never take advantage of the opportunities presented to you, then nothing's gonna be made of them.
By the end of his presidency, black people were supporting the war in Iraq. It was a complete failure on so many levels. And the reason we failed to address it is because while he was in office, he was constantly being bombarded with gross racist ridicule. It seemed wrong under the circumstances to criticize him at the same time. It's the epitome of the failure of identity politics as a core aspect of one's political analysis. So be better here. Know that Mamdani will be subject to constant racism from here on, but also don't allow that to distract you from being critical when he earns that criticism. Again, we will have to engage with 2 truths at once. 2, pay attention to whom he empowers and where he compromises and how he compromises.
Like, to me, caution, it means you have to play it in both directions, right? Caution can't just mean wait for every opportunity to criticize. Because if that's the case, why are you being cautious? You should just disavow. Like, caution is when you need to engage with something, but be careful. It seems to me like the only engagement that we're preempting here is a negative one. You know what I mean? What about celebrating the victories? Pay attention to who he empowers and where he compromises. I understand that, but do you understand what I'm talking about? It's like you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. Yeah, you're priming people to see negativity.
We already have Tish as one red flag. There will probably be others. We need to be ready on his...
But you didn't engage with why the Tish pick might have been necessary. I think you could make an argument for or against, but you only made the argument against, right? That's a red flag for me, I guess, in terms of your ability to evaluate a promising candidate, because there will always be compromises and difficult decisions. You have to be able to at least acknowledge that there could have been a reason.
Head each time we see one. In the same vein, to give credit where credit is due, Mamdani
Okay, maybe I'm preempting negativity.
Also appointed Dr. Derek Hamilton to his Transition Committee on Economic Development and Workforce Development. I'll link the video that Dr. Jared Ball made about it already, but to point out why this is kind of a cool thing, Dr. Derek Hamilton wrote the intro to Dr. Ball's book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, which is one of the more important books I think a lot of Black folks need to read, which seeks to help dispel the ideology that buying power and Black excellence and Black million.
I think white people can read this too. I haven't read it, but I think that we can also read it if we want to.
Millionaires and billionaires is what Black people need to save themselves.
But I'd love for us to get a conversation.
I'd love to. Oh, thank you.
That is a philosophy that is very dominant and preeminent in a lot of Black political spaces that needs to be done away with. And having someone who is amenable to that belief system be put in such an important role is probably the most radical thing he's done so far. Which I want to be clear, doesn't mean there's nothing to worry about. It just means that we need to continue to be critical and paying attention to everything that he's doing with the power that he's been imbued with.
I mean, basically everyone who's been added to his transition team has been based as hell, right? He's got a goddamn army. I was reading up on Lena Khan, apparently, as part of Mamdani's administration, looking into invoking some like 1960s era anti-price gouging law to try to start smacking New York City businesses with a stick. It's gonna be good.
As I said with Obama, he purposely began to run to a centrist neoliberal position pretty much the day after he came into power, and it should have been clear as day that that's where things would go from there on. But we didn't want to hear it. We wanted the imagination that we had created for ourselves that he ran on. Further, the biggest failure of Obama was not going far enough on the handful of populist leftist things that he ran on. For example, he didn't go far enough in the Affordable Health Care Act when he had the power to do so. Obama had a filibuster-proof majority for a calendar year, but didn't get the ACA done until a few months after that filibuster-proof status was gone. And he had started capitulating on a real universal health care plan before then. What we ended up with was, by Obama's words, based on the Republican health care plan, first introduced ironically by Mitt Romney a few years prior. And this shows that the status quo, the Republicans and the Democrats have this trick that they will definitely use with Mamdani, where Mamdani will start with a radical position and then move it further to the center, but still present it as a radical position. And then it will happen. It will be very much a status quo position, but the people will be saying and thinking that, oh, this was some type of radical accomplishment, when it really wasn't.
Yeah, but like Obama literally took a Republican healthcare plan and pushed that. Mamdani didn't take a Republican freeze the rent and make childcare free plan and push that. Like it would be another thing entirely if Mamdani's agenda suddenly pivoted and he was just pushing like MAGA economic policy or whatever the f that means. But that's just not really happening here, right? It's not what we're looking at, you know?
All that plus that dumbass beer summit he did in his first 2 years as president.
Tonight, a few guys are in Washington, D.C. having a cold one. They just happen to be a Harvard professor, a police officer from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the president of the United States.
All that happened, you get the point. What we not gonna do is allow Mamdani to use the excuse, I need to govern to the center or I won't get a second term. No. If he doesn't clearly fight for the promises he made during the campaign without turning them into moderate centrist reforms on the status quo, then he shouldn't get a second term. Period. End of conversation.
I agree. It's just like, damn, he's been so good. We're all being so negative over here. You know what I mean? It's like, no. I get it. I get when do we get to like talk positively about him? Not just in a like, okay, well, to be fair, he did this good thing, but like, I don't know. He seems like really, generally, he's been pretty great. I'm not really advocating for ignorance. I'm saying this is like a destructive level of preemptive cynicism that actually reduces your ability to properly evaluate his decision making, like the fact that he didn't bring up the potential reasons for keeping Commissioner Tisch. You know, if you can't engage with that reasoning, then it's what if Mamdani does stuff that's absolutely necessary and there's no way he can get around it, but you read it as some compromise towards the center, you know? Like, well, what if he's doing the best anyone could in his position, and then he gets canceled for it by the left and he starts to lose support because people online start like writing a bunch of contrarian video essays where they're like, has Mamdani lost the left? So Mamdani moved to the center. Mamdani, 2025's Obama. Mamdani, 2025 is the new 2008. You know what I mean? It's like, damn, like it's impossible out here. It is poisoning the well. You're preempting so much. You're preempting so much negativity. You're priming people to see this negatively and to not engage critically. And also, you're dampening the spirit because he can't get stuff done unless it looks like he has a broad base of support. If everyone's hedging their bets beforehand, how is he going to get any of this stuff done? You know? Like when he says we want free childcare, he needs like a roar, a massive roar of support from New Yorkers. If everyone online's like, he says that, but does he really want it? Then he's not going to be able to get it done at all. I get the feeling he's still getting over Obama trauma. I get that. However, and this is really, really important to keep in mind, Mamdani is nothing like Obama. The point of comparison is the wave of support and enthusiasm. In terms of their policies and how they talk about their policies, they are completely different. Obama never ran as like a super progressive or whatever. He wasn't listing out a bunch of crazy policies that he was going to implement. He talked about hope and change and vibes and we're getting better, we're getting over it, da-di-da-di-da, right? Like, they're not comparable in terms of their substance, only in terms of how people have responded to them. And if you can't, like, you have to be able to distinguish that. There's a meaningful difference there.
Conversation. I don't expect Mamdani to accomplish everything perfectly, but I do expect what is accomplished to legitimately help the working class people of New York. Lastly, and I'm just repeating myself here, but I can't drive this home enough, remember that the people made Mamdani and not vice versa. For everyone who rolled for Mamdani, organized around his campaign, and was inspired by his win, congratulations, you completed the tutorial section of the game. The real game starts now. I guarantee, especially in a city like New York, there's plenty more that you can do. It is so important that we do not slink off to the background after this political win, expecting Mamdani to just do everything we have in our imagination without being there to pressure him, hold him accountable, and create the environment for his platform to be viable. It's important for
creating the environment for his platform to be viable means supporting him, because his platform can't be viable if everyone's criticizing him all the time. Like the viability of his platform kind of hinges on public support. So supporting him is actually a part of maximizing the gains that you get from his environment.
To have a community and coalition powerful enough to be held accountable to.
You also have to go after the people who are opposing him, right? Kathy Holt or whatever, you have to go after her. Like if there are obstacles that he is facing, you need to identify the obstacle and not just blame him for failing to overcome it. You know, he's only human.
If it's just tweets and video essays, it's not going to amount to much. One thing I've been repeating a lot lately that I have to credit Dr. Jared Ball for is the fact that it's the people who make political leaders and the political environment of any time possible. I've done videos about the flawed politics of folks like Beyonce or Kendrick Lamar, etc., and how as much as we want them to be these radical political artists, they very much play things pretty safe. And that's because as a people, black and otherwise, we haven't created the environment of struggle that influences artists and leaders to be beholden to what we really desire. When we go back and look at the 60s and 70s and praise people like Harry Belafonte, James Baldwin, Nina Simone, Sidney Poitier, and many others who were pushing a truly radical pro-black agenda in the mainstream media in the 60s, understand that's because the culture at the time demanded it almost in unison. We had the power in our approval and dollars to hold them to account, and we still have that now. So if you were active, stay active. If you weren't active, get active. If getting active isn't easy, consider other ways you can still contribute. And that brings me back to my folks here in Buffalo. These folks from Lola just started something and began
I mean, yeah, but they were also people the culture didn't always demand it. Yeah, I do feel like it's a bit of a simplification. Everyone wants to avoid great man theory, but sometimes a person really truly is just goated with the sauce, and they single-handedly steer culture in a given direction. Actually, it happens pretty often, you know? History shouldn't be thought of as a succession of big people with big ideas, but if you're talking about like in a more, micro level, how any specific movement or election or whatever was possible, sometimes a person really is like pretty goated, you know? You have to take that.
In their community because they had a vision for trying to do more than just go to protests and pout about it on Twitter. And in the process of doing real work, they encountered the fact that Buffalo, New York is trying to be the site of yet another Cop City project.
All right, hold on. We've been on this one for a while.
everywhere, and these battles to stop them are hard and costly.
The city did do an environmental
out there. It's not like it'll be a magical fix, but nothing gets fixed by just watching video. That said, if you do want,
unless they're mine, like and subscribe. Yeah, okay. The video wasn't super bad. I think that there is a real danger of priming people for negativity to the point that you basically guarantee you will see negativity. You do need that big swell of support. If you don't have it, then you're not going to be able to get the results that you want. I met Zoran at NYC at a coffee shop in the early stages of the campaign. I mentioned to him we need to power wash the Guggenheim. He gave me his actual number and said he'll try to help get it cleaned up. Stopped replying after he won, which sucks, but he used to reply to my text lol. That's insane. He gave you his actual number and he kept replying to you up until he won? Okay. God damn. Can I be real with you guys? As a young person who's felt genuine hope for political change was Iran's win, I see his win and platform as a starting point to galvanize other leftists to go further and gain the positions needed to actually shape policy towards a more leftist position, not as the be-all end-all of what can be accomplished. We need to go out and make the changes that he showed us possible if we go out and organize to return the back. I think that this sentiment genuinely moves the needle left less than the guy showing up to Mamdani's rallies with the MAGA for Mamdani hat. I think that this like masturbatory, hands clutched in lap, like, okay, now that we have achieved an electoral victory, I will use it as a springboard and we will advocate for the people, the working people of the world. Like, if you went out there to a Mamdani rally and you painted your belly like the Mamdani orange and yellow and you went, and just any time he said anything, I think you might move the needle further. This has always been the issue with leftists: masturbatory, obsessed with the internal world, obsessed with the external image of the self. You know, what would Marx think of me? I can't get caught up in enthusiasm. I can't get caught up in excitement. Well, you know what the Red Army was? It was a bunch of peasants caught up in excitement. All right. You know what Mao's army was? A bunch of peasants caught up in excitement. You need to. You're too individually focused right now. You know, it's your internal world. It's this is what I ought to say. This is what I ought to think. You have to get out there. You have to be aggressive. You have to be excited. You all know what I mean, right? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, as always. Statements uttered by people who will never, ever, ever experience power in their lifetime. What was that quote from Player Piano? Why didn't you tell me we had small chance of winning? Because in order for us to have had even a small chance of winning, we needed to pretend we were guaranteed to win. That's how all campaigns work, by the way. You know, Mamdani went from polling 1% to winning the election. I feel like if everyone thought this way, we would never be able to win. You have to you run forward with that delusional energy and confidence. It's the only hope. Do you think Trump thinks like that? Of course not. No, 0% chance. No. Trump has never in his life thought there could be consequences for his actions, and that's why he's gotten as far as he has. Everyone needs to get more delusional now. All right? That's what I'm saying.